He says it was graduation, and he says we were celebrating our graduation, the fact that I was engaged and everything, and a bunch of the young graduates went out together for a celebration. We went to have a shore dinner. Now, he says, we were having this shore dinner, and he says, you see, up to this point I agree with you positively, Dave, but here I have to differ with you. It doesn't happen like you say at all. Now, he says, we had dinner, and remember, we were perfectly happy. My girlfriend and myself and all these other boys and girls, all medical students, all finishing college and so on. And he says, we were having a shore dinner. Everybody had clams, oysters. You know what a shore dinner is composed of. He says, all of a sudden, I got so sick. Everybody stayed perfectly well, but I got sick, and he says, I almost died. And when I found out that I was allergic to clams, and it was the clams that had made me sick, that's what made me an allergist, because I decided if I could almost die, there must be a lot of people who are very sensitive to various foods, and I wanted to find out something about allergies and find out why people are sensitive. So I said, and doctor, would you mind if I did a little bit of hypnoanalysis on you? And he says, no, go ahead. I said, well, now look, I want to just find out what happened that night that you had the clams, because I think I can tell you it was an entirely different story than you're telling me. And he says, oh, it's just like I told you, Dave. This is the whole thing. Everybody was having a wonderful time. Everybody had clams, oysters, and all that stuff. I had the same. Everybody was well. I got sick. It's because I'm allergic to clams. I said, not at all, doctor. Not at all. Let's do hypnoanalysis right here, and let's find out just what caused you to become allergic. Gentlemen, I took that man back to that night. I had him relive it. I had him relive the episode little by little. And it was revealed to him, apparently he had blocked it out of his mind, that night he and his girl had a terrible fight just before the shore dinner, that she handed him back his ring, and she told him that she was never going to marry him if he was the last guy on earth. He was the most miserable wretch that you ever heard of. Now they sat down to a shore dinner, and that's when they couldn't stomach the clams, and that's when the allergy proved itself. When he saw in hypnoanalysis what had happened, he says, Dave, what you're saying now, I realize it must be true with everybody. Why is it that we can take skin tests, hundreds of them, and we find that the person is allergic, and yet he doesn't feel, he shows that he's allergic by the skin test, yet he'll eat the chocolates or nuts or fish and never affects him. Then all of a sudden it does affect him, and we say, well, he shouldn't have had it. He should know better than eat it. He's allergic to it. The fact of the matter is that he's always been allergic to it. But it's never a vile poison until the emotions change something within the body. Either the adrenaline might be what does it, I don't know, but the excitement or some emotion comes along, and immediately they become violently ill. It might interest you to know this. My own son, my youngest boy, is terribly allergic. He's at MIT, and we're very proud of that boy because of the fact that he won a 4-year scholarship, over 50,000 boys, to MIT, and is considered one of the really bright boys there. But he says, Dad, on the phone the other night, he says, oh, Dad, I'm just such an average student here. I don't know. He says, everybody seems to have more sense than I have. He says, if I just make the grades, it'll be all right. Well, anyhow, Larry was very allergic. He would come home from school, and he would just have a fight on the way home. And by the time he got home, he would be so violently ill with asthma and everything else that he'd have to lie down for 2 or 3 weeks. We'd call the doctor. We'd do everything. And I can remember my wife saying to me one day, well, let me tell you what had happened. He had had these attacks one after the other. Sometimes they would start right there in the creaks of the elbows and the knees, and then through mechanical irritation, that dermatitis or whatever it is, would extend from the shoulder to the arm and from the buttocks to the ankle. And it would all look like raw meat. And it was a terribly distressing situation. The doctors didn't seem to be able to do anything for it. And this was before the days when I was teaching. This was about 9-10 years ago. And I can remember my wife coming out of his bedroom one day where he was lying ill. And she said to me, you and your hypnosis, if it was any good at all, you'd use it on your son. And I said, well, I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about what to do for a case like that. Sure, it's good for medicine, but I'm not a doctor. And she said, well, at least you could tell him that it wouldn't itch, couldn't you? I said, sure, that wouldn't hurt. She said, well, then hypnotize him and tell him it won't itch. Well, I hypnotized him and told him it wouldn't itch. And lo and behold, about 2 days later, he's all this and has become scabs. And in a few days more, you can see that they're just about ready to drop off. Now it's about 4 or 5 days later, my wife says to me, well, look, you told him it wouldn't itch, and you see it's worked. It's done more than all the medicines we've ever had. Now why didn't you tell him he'll get well in a hurry? Is that going to hurt you to tell him that? I said, no, I guess not. So I told him it wouldn't itch and that he'd get well in a hurry. And lo and behold, he got well in a hurry. No. Had I cured the allergies? No, of course not. I had merely removed that present allergic reaction which he had. Now I began teaching him autosuggestion. Now I began doing some hypnoanalysis to find out where the allergy stemmed from. He was quite cooperative by teaching him autosuggestion and doing a little hypnoanalysis. We have been able to keep that boy fairly healthy over the years. It was quite nervy when I finally told him that he could eat chocolate, nuts, and fish any time he wanted to, provided he wasn't emotional at the time that he ate them, and provided he gave himself suggestions beforehand. So he'd say green, 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 and eat chocolates or nuts or fish or any of those things that had made him sick up to that time. And now he could eat them without having any reaction at all. But I was smart enough, I think, to tell him, Larry, if there's the slightest bit of emotion, you can't eat nuts, you can't eat chocolate, you can't eat fish. Be sure of that. And because of that, because he's been pretty consistently good about that, I don't think he's had any allergy attacks to speak of. In the past, maybe, well, I think he's had about 2 attacks in the last 9 years. Has he had more than that, would you say? 2 allergy attacks in the last 9 years. I'm saying this to you because I want you to know that allergies have a beginning. I can remember talking in class, and then some doctor would say, well, what about penicillin? Can you suggest a way penicillin reaction? And I said, gee, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you that. But we have found out, yes, you can suggest a way penicillin reaction. And I can tell you that with absolute confidence and assurance now. We've had enough doctors do this so that you can do it. I know that the penicillin reaction must be on an organic basis, but I think that fear probably plays a large part in it. And if you're afraid you're going to be allergic to penicillin, you're allergic to penicillin. And I think suggestions, I know suggestions, have been used by about 100 doctors, along with hypnoanalysis, to allay penicillin reaction, and it works faster than almost anything that you can think about. Now, I was talking about allergies, and I was talking about the pinpoint method. Now, I just want to talk to you about 1 or 2 other methods that I've not had a chance to show here before the group. One is the play-acting method. Let them see a play. Suppose you're doing a hypnoanalysis, and you get right to the traumatic situation, but they aren't ready to reveal the traumatic situation. For example, here is a stutterer brought to class. We know that if we're able to get the traumatic situation which caused the stuttering out of the boy, he won't stutter. But we go right to that point of where the traumatic situation occurred. He's in a vacant house. The janitor or whoever's taking care of that vacant house chases him outside and says, you can't play in an empty house. There's no place for a little boy. He's only about 2 or 3 when this happens. He goes outside. He goes to a cave that is on the property. Now he's playing outside on the property. And we follow him in hypnoanalysis right to the place where the cave, the entrance to the cave, and then he can't go any further. He becomes terrorized. He's afraid to go any further. What did he see in the cave? What scared that boy and caused him to stutter? We can't go any further, and you couldn't go any further if you hit such a case. But there is a technique which enables you on many occasions to have that revealed to you as to what the traumatic situation was, and then you can give it to the patient a little bit at a time and finally give them the whole story at conscious level. You tell them this: tonight when you go home, you're going to have a dream. When you fall asleep, you're going to have a dream. And in this dream, you're going to see a play. It won't be you, but it will be someone who represents you. And he'll be watching that scene at the cave, and you'll see that person that represents you go to the cave, and you'll see what he sees, and you won't be afraid to tell me. And if you want to tell me, you'll tell me. And if you don't want to tell me, you won't tell me. But you have this whole play enacted in your dreams. Again, you can tell him to dream it out. And he will dream out the traumatic situation and will reveal it to you. If you follow the techniques given here, you'll find that the play acting technique, the dream it out technique, are awfully good techniques to use. My old students may have seen me use one or more of these techniques. How about Dr. Bergman? Did I use that in the Cleveland class at all? We didn't see any of it. Dr. Rogers, you saw me use the dream it out technique, and it works pretty well, doesn't it? It works beautifully. Yes,
Can
Doctor.
you have them dream it out then and there?
You can, but many times they don't want to dream it out then and there. Many times they show a resistance at that point. Maybe they aren't ready to reveal it. Or maybe they're ready to have it revealed to themselves, but not ready to reveal it to the therapist. Do you see what I mean? So that many times, if they aren't ready, don't urge them. Don't force them, or you'll find that you go no further with the patient. Just remember that when the patient is ready... What?
They may object to hypnosis.
Yes, they will refuse to allow themselves to enter the state. So don't ever urge them beyond the point where they're ready to give. They'll give you the truth, and they'll keep you on the truthful pattern. Now, I think one of the nicest things that we've ever used, you see these tape recorders? They're wonderful devices to use in hypnoanalysis. If you get a person who has complete amnesia for the hypnoanalysis, you record the entire interview, remove the names, dates, places, and so on. Edit it is what I mean. If you bring them back the following week, and you say, I know a patient with a case just like yours. I recorded the interview, and I want you to hear it. Because maybe you could tell that fellow how to get well, just like I'd like to be able to tell you how to get well. And that man or woman will listen to the tape without the slightest idea that they themselves are giving it. They'll listen to their own interview and will give you charged material. Incidentally, this is a method which the psychiatrists love. I don't know whether or not it's a good technique for those who are not students of the human mind. I can only tell you that the psychiatrists that have used it love the technique and say that a lot should be written about it as to what it will do for a person, because they'll come out of it and tell you that, or they'll listen to this record and they'll tell you the darndest things about what that person should do to get well. And I'll bet I know what scared them. It was a so-and-so and a so-and-so, and you'll find out that they're revealing just what scared them. And they don't realize that they're doing it. And so they're tremendously helpful. Before we close on hypnoanalysis, because next week we have to go into other things, I'd like to take any questions that any of you might want to ask about hypnoanalysis and its techniques. I think you've seen enough to let you know that it can be a vastly useful thing to you. But I don't want you to think that it isn't for use in dentistry just as it's for use in medicine. It is, gentlemen, it is. And you can use it that way. Now, the dentist should use it on dental problems. The physician should use it on every type of neurotic problem. Let's take the question now. Yes, sir.
What would you do in case of a child who developed a neurosis at 6 weeks?
Nothing. I wouldn't know how to handle it, I'm afraid. I haven't got the slightest idea how to handle it, because when I know that those things have occurred, and I think that psychiatry is about the only answer that will truthfully reveal it. It might be possible. I've never been able... I took a man one time back to his circumcision, which occurs in the Jewish faith at 8 days. And I have never been sure in my own mind whether he was actually back at his own circumcision or whether he was reliving what he had been told had occurred by his father and mother and those who were dear to him. We can never be sure when we take the patient back before the age when the mentality or the intellect has developed that we are hitting the right place. For instance, last week we had a little boy, 5 years old. He stutters. Now, it was very fortunate in this particular case that we were able to go back to the time when his baby sister was born, which was a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden he found himself deprived of a lot of the attention. And he is a very loving child and wants the attention he always got, but now all the attention seems to be centered on the youngster in the family, and he's treated like the big boy. And in his resentment at being treated like a big boy, a little traumatic circumstance comes along, and now he can no longer talk. And when we brought him back in hypnoanalysis, he was able to tell us that he had developed the stutter as a defense mechanism against the enchantment that his sister had for Papa and Mama. When I assured him that Papa and Mama, and certainly the father as a physician, that Papa and Mama would pay just as much attention to him as to the baby, and that he'd get just as much loving, and if he got just as much loving, you wouldn't have to stutter then, would you? And he says, no, I wouldn't have to stutter. But if that thing had gone back to 6 weeks, I don't know how we would have handled it with hypnoanalysis. At least I know no techniques, and I don't know any psychiatrist in America who knows techniques that will most certainly affect results. They can only presume that they are affecting results and hope that they are affecting results. But those I have talked to say that when they agree with me that when it goes back beyond the time when the intellect was formed, you can't do much good, or that is, you can't do good a good deal of the time. Let's put it that way. You'd be surprised what these kids tell you in hypnoanalysis. I've had a doctor with a son, 11 years old, asthma so bad that he took him out west someplace to this Denver clinic and so on. And they weren't able to do much for the kid out there. We put him into hypnoanalysis, and we found out just what the asthma stood for and just why he holds on to the asthma. And the father and mother, whom I had taken into the side room where they could hear everything that was said but were not present, as they heard what the son said, they almost collapsed in the next room because it had never dawned on them that a little child could have such thoughts. Yet the child never revealed them to father or mother. Rail started about 1 year, and he got mother to the crib that way. Imagine a little kid telling you that that's the way he used to get his mother to the crib. That if he had asthma like that, she'd come running over to the crib. Otherwise, he could cry, and she just would pay no attention to him. But the minute he got asthma, she'd come over. It was an attention getter. So he didn't want to lose that asthma. I finally had to convince him.
He said he didn't want to lose it.
Yeah, I finally had to convince him of why he should lose it to be a healthy young man, and so on. And incidentally, his child is much better now as a result, because father and mother were able to work with him.
But 5 isn't too young to be...
Oh, of course not. Doctor, I've done hypnoanalysis on 3-year-old kids. Not always with success, mind you. I look, this isn't a panacea. I talk, or perhaps because you see a lot of remarkable things happen in hypnoanalysis, you probably think to yourself, well, my God, he can work with anything. Oh, no, I fail just as often as you fail in medicine. You know what I mean. It isn't surefire.